this is interesting because Gervais unknowingly makes a point that undermined Dawkins' own assertion. He asks Dawkins, what would you believe if you lived prior to Darwin? And Dawkins says, I would be a theist. And then Gervais comes back by saying, well, if you had been born in New Delhi, you wouldn't believe in God. If you had been born in some ancient place, you would have had different beliefs than the ones you do have, implying that therefore one's present beliefs are invalid and false because if you'd been born someplace else, you would have had different beliefs. Well, what that suggests is that Dawkins' own atheism, his own beliefs, are just the product of his being born in this time and place. And if he had been born someplace else, he would have had quite different beliefs. So this is the kind of double-edged sword that the genetic fallacy gets you into, trying to invalidate a person's beliefs by showing how he came to hold them is a fallacy. And so pointing out that you would have held different beliefs if you had born in a different time and place in history does absolutely nothing to invalidate the truth of the beliefs that you do have. And if they do, then it invalidates Dawkins' own beliefs.
And Bill, they started the video off talking about the beauty of the trees and the stars. And Ricky says, yeah, you know, I have just as much appreciation and am just as awed by that as any God believer, God-believing person. Well, what's the point they're trying to make there?
The point was supposed to be that the world mediated to us by modern science is not bleak. But I don't think that refutes the claim. When we talk about the bleakness of the world that is described solely by science, what one means is that this is a world which exists to no purpose. It will ultimately end in the heat death of the universe as the universe expands into a cold, lifeless, dark, and dilute condition from which it will never reemerge. It puts a question mark behind the entire edifice of human civilization and accomplishment. All of the things that Gervais mentions as noble and good about humanity are all doomed to destruction in the heat death of the universe. And that's the bleakness of the worldview of scientific naturalism. Has nothing to do with the fact that one can appreciate the beauty of a mountainside or art or music or something of that sort.
Let's continue.
Well, now Dawkins himself has affirmed that we're just animated chunks of matter. So his own view is, this demeaning view, that we are just a bag of chemicals on bones. Why is that troubling? Well, because it means that we're not rational, free agents. We're just determined. There is no free will. There is no ability to reason rationally. We're just determined in everything that we do by our genetic makeup and the stimuli that we receive through our senses. And that is indeed discouraging, I think. As Dawkins says in the God Delusion, there's no good, there's no evil, there's just pitiless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA, and there isn't anything more to our existence than that. So I think that is a very depressing view of human existence.
What'd you think about what they said about, well, believing in God and be spiritual, that's harmless? Dawkins hadn't treated it like it's very harmless. He's really gone after theism. But they said, but religion is not harmless. Religion can cause great pain. I don't know anybody who would disagree with that. I mean, obviously
I know,
the
so
abuse...
much of this interview is just banalities, Kevin. I don't even find it interesting. It's just banal talking about these silly truisms that religion can be misused for great atrocities. Well, same thing is true of atheism. I mean, look at Stalin, look at Mao. Goodness sake, the atrocities perpetrated in the name of atheism make atrocities in the name of religion pale by significance. So this is uninteresting.
But it would have an effect on the populace because these are two popular figures, especially Ricky Gervais, who it's a rhetorical advice here to try to lump it all in. Scientific naturalism has got the high road here. You religious people have got to give it up.
They've not said anything to suggest why that is the case.
Well, because
Right.
religion causes great harm.
Well,
Yeah.
but it causes great good as
Right.
well, and atheism also causes great harm, and the truth of a worldview is not determined by the amount of good or harm that it causes.
That's right. So unpack what they're saying here. Let's continue the video.
He says there's a magic to free will. Now, he's
Consciousness.
probably speaking metaphorically, but I mean, on his view, it is magic because everything is determined through these neural processes over which you have no control because there is no soul or mind distinct from the brain. So this fellow wants to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to affirm an atheistic or secular view of the world while affirming free will, aesthetic value, meaning, and so forth. And he never seems to understand the deep incoherence in his own thinking.
No, he's talking about the transcendental aspects of life, Bill, but then just saying, isn't it magical?
Yeah,
You know,
right.
or isn't it weird? You know, but it can't be God. Let's continue. Bill, this is the magic show.
I know, they keep using the word magic. Now, I'm sure they're meaning this in a metaphorical sense. It's magical in the sense of wondrous, and
Yes.
they said amazing, and so forth. But it's worse than that. It really is magic that on a scientific naturalistic view of the world, you've got these transcendental selves, these consciousnesses, which Gervais thinks have free will. I'm not sure what Dawkins' view is of the self, but in any case, if it is totally dependent or supervenient upon the brain, and the direction of causal influence is totally from the brain to the consciousness, not from the mind to the brain, to the body. If the direction of causality is asymmetrical, it's just from the body to the consciousness, then again, that lands you right in determinism. And while that may be complicated and amazing in that sense, which it is, nevertheless, that completely robs human life of any sort of moral significance or I think rational decision making. It just turns you into the bag of chemicals that Dawkins was talking about earlier.
He says, though, that because this is just chemical firings in your brain and we're a bag of chemicals, that does not diminish the magic of it one bit or the wonder of it one bit. In fact, he thinks because it's all natural and there's not and God doesn't have anything to do with it, he thinks it makes it more wonderful. Well, why would he say that? I mean, that's
well,
just,
I think because of the complexity of it.
Yeah.
And as he said, it is amazing. I mean, the human body is absolutely astonishing. The human brain is the most complex organism in the entire universe. There is nothing more complex than that single human brain. So it is astonishing and amazing. I agree with him completely about that. But the question we're, I think, supposed to be asking is human life worth living on this sort of naturalistic view of the self and the person? And what I'm waiting to hear is something that would invest human beings with freedom of the will, rationality, moral significance, and those sorts of things don't come into the picture on scientific naturalism except by the repeated appeal to magic. All right, what they say, I've heard this from other naturalists too. It doesn't matter if free will is an illusion because you think you have it. You're under the illusion of acting freely, and so you can do nothing else. But of course it matters enormously, because if you really don't have any free will, then you are literally deluded. You are the most pathetic of creatures to think that you have free will and are making significant choices when in fact you're not. You're just a machine is all. And your choices have no moral significance. They are not done for rational reasons. I think they have completely stripped humanity of any sort of significance different from that of a worm. It's just a more complicated nervous system, and they don't seem to get the point.
Bill, they're reacting to what they're always being told, what's always being thrown at them, in the same way that atheists, agnostics, and so on are always said, how can you be moral without God? We've fought that. We've demonstrated that in your work has shown, well, yes, you can recognize morality. In the same way, they're saying, okay, not only can we recognize and act morally without God, we can also recognize beauty and enjoy life, and we're tired of you people telling us that we can't without belief in God. You see, that's what they're reacting to. They're trying to convince the public that yes, we can, we can. So maybe we need to do what you're doing, and not just throw in their faces, how can you guys appreciate the world and life?
Oh, but
and have
nobody
meaning?
does say that. Nobody says atheists can't appreciate music and beauty and architecture and literature. They're fighting against boogeymen of their own imagination. No intelligent Christian is making those sorts of claims. They're making the claims that I just made, that they're giving us a worldview that strips us of rationality, moral significance, and freedom, and yet they don't seem to understand the existential importance of that, because they're happy to be deluded. They're happy to operate under the illusion that you have these things.
He said, if it's an illusion, great, I'm enjoying this illusion.
Yeah, right. You know, it reminds me of what Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, said, is that people would choose inauthentic existence rather than authentic existence because they can't bear the heavy burden of freedom and really making significant choices. And I can think of nothing that more exemplifies the choice to be inauthentic than what we've just heard. Inauthentic existence, I would prefer to operate under the illusion that I have free will and am significant than face the hard facts of what my worldview implies. He tries to say that if everything's determined, then how do you meet the challenge that nobody's responsible for what he does? And Dawkins says, my neurons made me do it. Right, that's exactly correct on a deterministic view. So there is no moral responsibility. So Gervais' response is, well, you gotta lock them up anyway to protect other people. But that doesn't rescue moral responsibility. You still have completely evacuated our choices of any moral significance and therefore made impossible moral praise or blame on this view. Here again, I feel like I'm free, and that's all that matters. It doesn't make it worth worrying about. Well, it certainly makes it worth worrying about if you're asking that original question, is human life worth living? On their view, you're just machines, not rational moral agents, and there is no moral praise and blame on his view. For anybody who thinks deeply, this is a very troubling view of the world, and to just be happy to say, well, you feel like you have free will even if you don't, is, as I say, incredibly inauthentic.
It's like he's saying, well, I think determinism is sound, but nevertheless, I feel like I'm making my own choices. So
right, he thinks determinism is true, but in effect, he's saying, I can't live that way.
once you know a placebo is a placebo, it's not a very good placebo anymore. You have to either put your brains in the...
Although, I mean, it's really true. You can't live as if determinism is true. It's impossible to live consistently with this atheistic view of the world as though everything you do is just determined. Because you'd never reflect on anything. You would just act. But on determinism, even your reflections are determined. It's not rational.
Let's continue. What he's referring to there is Douglas Adams talking about this puddle must be designed. Look how perfectly the water fits the
into
puddle.
the hole. Yeah, what a silly, stupid caricature of intelligent design reasoning. That doesn't bear any relationship whatsoever.
Maybe Adams is trying to be funny, but people have run with it as if it's serious.
I mean, honestly, Kevin, this is just, it just shows the intellectual deficiency of anybody who thinks like that. This is comparing the teleological argument to somebody who says that the human nose must be designed because look at the way it's just in the right place to support your glasses for correcting your vision.
Yeah.
That is a ridiculous argument because the thing has been tailored to fit this way. Similarly, the water fits the puddle because it has to flow into the dimensions of the hole.
That's the nature of water.
But that has nothing to do with either the sort of biological complexity that exists in the world or the fine-tuning of the initial conditions of the universe, which are there independently and antecedently to, that fine-tuning is, but let me say that differently, which are not comparable to these sort of fallacious examples of supposed design. The minefield is for him and Dawkins, and they don't even seem to realize that they're staggering blindfolded through this minefield, trying to affirm the value of human life and its wonder and worth, all the time affirming scientific naturalism, that we're just animated chunks of matter, determined to do what we do like machines, on having no rationality, no free will, no moral worth, and then this blithe sort of breezy dismissal of religious concerns. It just, to me, it's just amazing to see people discoursing like this, and then saying that it's the religious believers who are the ones that are illogical. This fellow is the one who needs to take a good course in elementary logic.
You saw his typical definition or misdefinition of faith there as well. He says, faith is the stopper. My only argument is I have faith, and so he's misunderstanding faith there. But that's what so many people think, and that's what so many atheists think. That's what really a lot of Christians think. They misunderstand, at least definitionally, what it is. So this is an area to shore up and I think educate people on. That's why we have an organization called Reasonable Faith. Continuing.
Here it seems to me he's trying to justify the move to atheism from agnosticism by saying that if you don't have evidence for something, therefore you're justified in believing that thing doesn't exist. And that's clearly fallacious. He calls it a nifty logical move to try to say that you're just left with agnosticism. The whole question here is, under what conditions does absence of evidence count as evidence of absence? And it would be in cases in which, if the thing did exist, you would expect to have more evidence of its existence than what you have, and secondly, that you have thoroughly compassed the field where that evidence should appear and not found it. Now, the atheist then has the very heavy burden of showing that those two conditions are met. in the case of God. And certainly these fellows have not shouldered that burden successfully.
How long, Bill, are we going to have to beat this Santa, fairies, flying spaghetti monster thing? And here he is bringing it up again.
Yeah.
They're comparing it. You know.
Does this silliness even need refutation, Kevin? The difference between a theist and an atheist is that the theist believes that God exists. There is, in particular, an omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, metaphysically necessary, all good creator of the universe to whom we are responsible. That is not a hair's breadth away from an atheist who denies that there is any such being. So this is just intellectually silly to make this comparison.
Well, we have to continue to fight in this battle because years ago we dealt with this quote from some guy named Steve. That's all I remember, saying, I believe in one less God than you do, you know, and so on. And here he is bringing that out again.
What this seems to show is that just as in the Christian subculture, there are certain patterns of thinking and styles, lingo that gets perpetuated on and on and on, and is sort of insulated from the wider world. I think in the atheist subculture, too, there must be this sort of insular pattern of thinking that just gets perpetuated from one generation to the next.
You're exactly right. There was a time when I was online a lot more, doing a lot of more online evangelism, that I could meet someone that I never knew, I've never met before, online or whatever, begin to dialogue with them and see phrases and things coming out of the mouth, and I could point you to the exact website where they got that and who was saying it, and they had their little bumper sticker sayings just like we do. You know, Christians aren't perfect, just forgiven. You know, there are so many of them, and you know, versions of Pascal's wager and little things that we say. Yeah, boy, do they have it. Let them suffer through it for a while, because I can tell you there are a handful that are just passed around. You know, so yeah.
Let's just comment on that, because I think this is correct. He's talking about the physical world. Science tries to understand the physical world and the way it works, and this is a wonderful process. If only these new atheists would stick to that limited understanding of science and its project, much of this whole debate would be eliminated. It's when they begin to arrogate to themselves the role of telling us how reality as a whole is beyond the physical world, that they get out of their field of specialization and begin to make metaphysical claims which they cannot support. So all of this talk of God and religion and so forth is extra scientific, and therefore outside of their domain of expertise and outside the domain of science.
If you were to press Ricky, you would probably see that he's probably pretty scientistic. He says science is about discovering the nature of reality.
No, he didn't, though. He said the world. And if they would just stick to the idea that the world, the physical world, is a part of reality, then it would be unproblematic. Now, maybe you're right, Kevin, when he says the world, he means everything there is. And if that's the case, then you're right. That's scientism, not recognizing the limits of science.
Yeah. Bill, final thoughts on this? One of the reasons we want to address it.
I think I've rarely spent so worthless a 15 minutes in my life as listening to this banal conversation of such caricatures and straw men and fallacious inferences. It's pathetic. And at the bit at the end, attempting to portray themselves as victims is the most ludicrous of all. Here are two extremely successful and rich men, and thinking themselves as poor me, because I'm an atheist, I'm so shunned and victimized. Oh, don't make me laugh.